few years ago, a Reddit account by the name of LadyIris was created. While some of her posts and comments were no cause for concern, others seemed to hint that she might be a serial killer in the making. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check those out, links will be in the description. This video will contain vague discussions of topics that some might find distressing. Viewer discretion is advised. You can head over to my Patreon for an uncut version of this video, which features extra details that were too graphic for this cut. If you were shown a select few of LadyIris's posts, you probably wouldn't think anything was amiss. She's married, she's a piano teacher, she seems to have an interest in baby names, and her first post in 2015 was a photo of some puppies. However, there's another side to Iris, a depraved side that enjoys violence and fantasises about murdering and torturing people. For all we know, it's gone beyond fantasy. LadyIris isn't Iris's only account. She had already made a name for herself as Allegretta, though it sounds like she was shadow banned on that account. Unfortunately, it has since been suspended. You can find quite a few of her posts by googling the username, but Iris did say in a comment that she was trying to tame down her posts now to avoid getting banned again, so it's likely that the worst posts were deleted. The most recent account I found was under the name Porcelain Peony, and another of her usernames was Falsevirtues. From August 2015, possibly long before that on other accounts, Iris was active most days and most frequently posted on Ask Reddit and the Morbid Questions subreddit. As the name Morbid Questions suggests, that subreddit is full of questions about death, murder, torture and various other gory topics. I think it's safe to assume that the vast majority of people who post there are not murderers or sadists, they're just normal people with morbid curiosity, like me and probably you too if you're watching this. Iris's first few posts could have passed as just that, morbid curiosity. She asked for people's opinions on suicide. What would happen if someone was forced to swallow Drano, which is drain cleaner? What are the best ways to cause extreme harm to people that won't instantly cause their death? I mean, that one out of context is pretty questionable, but it wouldn't exactly stand out on that subreddit. Still, at least at first, there was no indication that Iris actually took enjoyment out of violence and torture. That was until a post asking why there was no link to a homicide hotline on the sidebar of Morbid Questions. If you're anything like the top commenter, you're probably thinking that would just be 999 or 911 depending where you live. But Iris clarifies that she means a hotline where you can talk to someone if you feel like you want to kill someone, as if that's a normal thing. She goes on to debate with users who think she would or should be arrested for admitting that on a hotline, and she makes a fair point that it's better to ask for help than to actually kill someone, but when people's lives are at stake, it's hard to be down with taking that chance. She makes it clear that it's not about anger management, it's a sadistic urge to commit homicide, and she implies she needs help coping. I'm sure there are plenty of people who have thought about murdering a specific person. Of course most would never do it, but for Iris, it's not that there's a specific individual who has made her life hell in some way, or someone who's committed an awful crime themselves and she would see murdering them as revenge or justice. As the following post will show, it seems that she just generally wants to inflict pain and suffering on someone because she would enjoy it. It would excite her even. She asks a variety of questions relating to murder and torture, some are very specific. I'll list a few of them now. What are the best places to shoot someone if you don't want them to die instantly? What are some fun and brutal ways to physically torture people? Why is it so thrilling to see violence happening to other people? What are some creative ways to kill someone and make it look like an accident? What do you think it feels like to beat someone to death? What happens if you put a cat in the microwave and turn it on? How does it feel to choke someone until they can't breathe? What are some of the best places to stab someone if you don't want them to die of blood loss? How long do you believe it would take for a person to die of malnutrition if they were only given water and McDonald's French fries indefinitely? It's worth noting that Iris isn't necessarily considering acting on all of the things that she thinks about and asks Reddit about. If nothing else, she does seem a very honest person when talking about all this, and while she openly admits to wanting to torture people and even describes how she would do that on occasion, some of the topics she posted about seem to be out of general interest. For example, she has posted about mass shootings before, but said that she has no desire to do that herself, which makes sense. Shooting people is much too quick a death to appeal to her. At times, Iris considers the morality of murder. It's hard to tell whether she's just genuinely interested in the moral debate, or she gets some kind of kick out of contemplating it, or if she's just trying to find a way to rationalise what she might go on to do, or perhaps even what she's already done. It seems that she's at least interested in determining when most people would consider murder ethical. For example, one of her questions was, if there was undeniable proof that a very pleasant afterlife existed for all human beings, would it still be frowned upon to kill innocent people? I get the feeling that some of her questions show her attempt to dissuade herself from murdering someone. For example, one on Ask Reddit read, "Besides prison and the death penalty, what are some good reasons not to kill anyone?" Though she has also asked for good reasons to kill someone too, it's almost like she's weighing up the pros and cons of it. On the whole, Iris seems fairly sure she won't murder anyone. She likes her life and freedom and she doesn't want to be caught or killed. She wouldn't rule it out though. It seems that she's pretty set on not killing any family members, but on numerous occasions she's made it clear that at some point she might no longer be able to contain the urge. The bottom line is, she really doesn't see a problem with taking someone else's life. The only thing stopping her is the possibility of getting caught. There's quite a bizarre contrast between her seemingly calm, at least somewhat intelligent demeanour, and the fact that there simply appears to be a missing link in her mind that prevents her from understanding why murder is unethical. In quite a few of her comments, she compares murdering a human to killing animals. For example, in response to someone saying that you have no right to choose whether someone lives or dies, she says, "And why not? We make that choice for animals all the time." But rather than using that as a point to highlight that maybe that's unethical for animals, she's using it as a justification for murdering humans. It's also worth noting that she says she hates racism. Perfectly logical opinion, but it's just weird to think that someone who would have no qualms literally taking someone else's life even cares about inequality or discrimination. It seems that Iris has had these urges ever since she was a child. She says she believes it started with her being enamoured by bad characters on TV and having a curiosity for actions that go against what is considered right. She was always a good kid, at least on the surface, but the pressure to be that way caused her to want to defy. She became obsessed with watching increasingly violent movies, and by the time she was a teenager, she realised that she got pleasure out of violence. Iris has clearly thought in depth about how she would go about murdering someone, from the method to the victim. The methods are a bit too graphic to discuss in this cut, but let's just say it seems that she would want to torture someone for a long time before they died. She says that she has harmed people before, only with their consent, but the consent takes most of the fun out of it. As for her victim, she's not really picky, but it makes sense for her to go for a woman, considering she is a woman herself and not very strong, and doesn't think she could overpower a man. She wouldn't rule out targeting a man, or someone who is bigger than her, but she'd need to drug them. She's not interested in poisoning anyone because that'd be too quick. The only thing she specifies about the victim is that she would need to have no ties to them. Until now, we've only seen a glimpse of Iris's fantasies, and on the whole she maintains that she probably won't kill anyone in real life. However, at least one of her fantasies became a reality, as she has admitted to killing a cat and harming other animals. I couldn't find when Iris first ever spoke about this, so I'm not exactly sure when it was, or how much detail she went into when describing it. This is obviously a huge red flag. It's already awful to think a poor cat died, but many serial killers start out by harming animals before moving on to humans. Iris actually said in a comment that she doesn't get any enjoyment out of harming animals. I hope that means she wouldn't do it again, but it could also make her more likely to move on to humans, because animals clearly don't satisfy that urge. Either way, she has actually committed a crime. It's gone beyond fantasy, so if she could be reported, there's a chance she'd face consequences for that, which might deter her even more from harming a person. The fact that very little is known about Iris makes it hard to report her though. I imagine if she made plans to commit a mass shooting or something on a larger scale and posted that online, There's probably a way that the FBI can find out her IP address from Reddit, but unfortunately, I doubt they'd take animal cruelty quite so seriously. At least one Reddit user claims to have reported Iris, but with limited information, the chances of her getting caught are slim. As for what we do know about Iris, or at least what she's told us, she's in her early 30s, she teaches children how to play the piano, she's married and has no kids, she lived in Texas at some point a few years ago but has moved several times since, and that's about it. The most specific detail is that she teaches piano, but even then I imagine there are thousands of female piano teachers who lived in Texas at some point, and that's assuming she's told us the truth about herself. She could have a totally different job, or be a totally different age, or she might not even be a woman for all we know. You might have been relieved when I said that Iris doesn't have kids, however it sounds like she plans to in the future. She also teaches kids and comes into contact with her nieces and nephews, who I assume are children, but I haven't seen the age specified. It's a worrying thought that children are in her life already, though it's not clear if she spends time alone with them. At least there's probably a smaller chance she'd harm them if someone else is usually with them, but if she had her own, there's a lot more opportunity. She claims that she would never kill her husband or any future children she might have, but I don't know how she can be so sure if she's not even sure that she could control the urge to murder in general. All it might take is for a child to particularly misbehave one day and she just snaps, or maybe she eventually regrets having children and sees killing them as the most logical solution. She can't be trusted around animals, let alone children, but the worrying part is that if no one is aware of her fantasies and the animal cruelty, who's going to stop her being around more animals and even children? Iris said that her husband is pretty much fully aware of her sadistic urges, and that she has told her friends a watered-down version of what goes on in her mind. I wonder if her husband really knows the extent of it though, particularly that she will possibly act on her urges one day, and that she already has when it came to the cat. Most people have the occasional dark thought, but it goes well beyond that for Iris, and I just can't imagine being happily married to someone that for all you know might well murder you one day. Some people believe that Iris is just an elaborate troll, someone trying to be an edgelord for internet points. They think the way she spoke was like someone trying to be edgy and crazy rather than someone who actually is. Analysing things like this can sometimes be useful, but it's not really a solid way of proving someone is trolling. Everyone has a different style when communicating on the internet, and regardless, Iris may well have been an edgelord, but that doesn't mean she didn't do the things that she claimed to, and that she doesn't have sadistic urges. Whether she would want to admit it or not, I get the feeling that she liked that people were shocked by her. She was always very matter-of-fact in the way that she described her fantasies. Sometimes she spoke as if they were completely normal, like you're the odd one out if you don't have those urges. I don't think that makes it any more or any less likely that she was being truthful though. She wouldn't be the first person to enjoy having that kind of persona. A couple of minor inconsistencies have been highlighted in things that Iris has said, but generally she's pretty consistent, and I wouldn't be surprised if she intentionally throws in a few red herrings to make sure no one identifies her. Overall, I don't think there's much reason to believe that Iris is a troll. I think that theory just makes people feel more comfortable. She's been posting on Reddit very frequently for at least 5 years now, possibly much longer. It's a lot of effort to go to without really gaining much from it. She is familiar to some users who have frequented Morbid Questions for a few years, and every now and then you see a name pop up in a thread elsewhere, but she's hardly famous from this. Each new account she created has, up until now, been linked to her by others, but she doesn't go out of her way to make it clear that she is LadyIris on a new account. In fact, sometimes she's tried to hide it to avoid getting banned again. Eventually, she can't help herself and admits it. As I said, she clearly enjoys all this, but it's not obvious that she's trolling. Another suggestion is that Iris is a crime writer who is struggling for ideas and hopes to get inspiration from Reddit. In discussions about her, I've seen a couple of other writers claim to do the same thing, albeit not anywhere near on that level. It also initially seemed a possibility that Iris was an actor who was trying to get into character. Both these theories became less and less likely the longer this went on though. If she was a writer, surely she'd have either written the book by now, or at least know what she was writing about, or she'd have given up after over 5 years. If she was an actor, you'd think she'd have played the role by now. It just makes no sense that she would post so frequently for such a long time. As far as I could find record of, Iris's most recent interaction was in December 2020. It's been around 10 months since then, so what happened to her? I'd like to think that she was just an edgelord who got bored of trolling, but I don't believe that's the case. Did she get sick of creating new accounts after each one got banned and eventually just abandon Reddit? Maybe she moved to a different site with less restrictions, like 4chan for example. Or maybe she's still lurking on Reddit, either not posting at all or only occasionally posting so people don't clock on that it's her. It's possible that she started to become wary after a few people claimed to have reported her to the authorities. She said on a different account to the one that she initially spoke about this on that no one could prove that she harmed any animals. But we just don't know what she's done in the past. Unfortunately, the law doesn't care enough about animals to thoroughly investigate Iris for that alone, but there's every chance that she's gone further than that in the past and hasn't been stupid enough to admit it. Perhaps she was already under investigation for something, and when people reported her account, the links were made and she was arrested. Even if she didn't already harm anyone by the time she stopped posting, there's every chance she had enough of fantasizing about murder and finally decided to actually do it. We'll probably never know. I did notice that one user, SithIsVX, seemed to be friends with Iris. At least they had some level of contact with her and even claimed to have seen a photo of her. I haven't totally ruled out Sithis just being another of Iris's accounts, a tamer one that she uses to talk about her other interests. They were created within a month of each other, and Sithis doesn't obsessively post about such morbid topics, yet they're totally fine associating with someone who openly admits they harmed animals and might kill a human in the future. Still, assuming Sithis isn't Iris, I messaged them asking what happened to her but haven't got a reply, and I doubt I will considering the account has been inactive for over a year. While it's a terrifying possibility that Iris could or already has harmed or killed someone, I think the scariest part about all this is the insight that you gain from a depraved person living an outwardly normal life. She claims to be caring and nurturing to the people in her life, and also claims to have empathy, but it sounds like the desire to gain pleasure from harming someone would override any empathy she feels in a situation where she wouldn't face any consequences. We often stereotype murderers and predators to the point where we're surprised when they don't fit that stereotype. It's just more comforting to think that you could pick one out of a crowd and that you could avoid them, rather than to acknowledge the huge amount of trust you place in so many different people every single day, assuming that they won't just suddenly flip and murder you. The truth is, Iris could be anyone. It could be your partner, your best friend, your co-worker, and there's no way of determining what percentage of the population fantasises about these things, as it's not something that most people would want to admit. Think about how many unsolved murders there are, not to mention disappearances that were probably murders but the bodies were never found. Then think about how many more people haven't murdered anyone yet, but gain pleasure in other sick ways, such as by hurting animals. And then think how many more than that enjoy thinking about these things but don't actually act on it. People like LadyIris remind us that we're not as safe as we think we are, and that anyone in our lives could be a ticking time bomb. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments, as well as any other notorious Reddit users you'd like me to cover. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my patrons, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Saturday for a bonus Halloween video.